With Jim out today, I'd like to take the opportunity to pick up the baton on one of his favorite complaints, which is also one of my favorite complaints of this season: the state legislators' biennial multi-month break, which before they rushed to finish, all that wasn't done in the 2 years prior. And this year there are some really big ones, among them a budget deal for the fiscal year that began 12 days ago, a bill aimed at expanding access to public meetings, and protections for out-of-state patients seeking abortions and those who treat them now that Roe has been overturned. And on that last point, there are some big divides between the House and the Senate. So what will they get done before the clock runs out? And what will get pushed down the road even further? I'm joined by GBH News reporter and host of Talking Politics, Adam Reilly, and new GBH News State House reporter, Katie Lannan. I'm not even going to get into how frustrating this is to me every single year about how they're surprised there's a deadline and things don't get done, right? But look, there are some really, not that there aren't every year, but this year there are some really urgent issues, especially around abortion. Adam, I want to show us first a letter that Senate President Karen Spilka sent out regarding trying to bring together the House and Senate colleagues. We write to urge a letter to Spilka, I'm sorry, saying we write to urge our Senate colleagues to accept the House provisions in H. 4954, an act expanding protections for reproductive rights, specifically the measures that clarify the statutory framework for abortions and expand access to emergency contraception in an immediate and accessible fashion. Adam, so they need to be reached out to come to a conclusion here and be led in the right way. What's happening with this?
Well, what I think is really interesting about this is that there's been this stereotype that's held true about the Senate and the House in the legislature in all the years that I've covered them, which is that the House is the more conservative body fiscally, but also socially. The Senate is unabashedly progressive and in a hurry to do great big things, and the House has to kind of be dragged along. The letter you sent is, among other things, to me, evidence of the fact that that is no longer the case. That letter was written by Kate Hogan. She's, I believe, the second-ranking member of the House, second-ranking Democrat in the House. And what she wants to do is change state law so that you can get a late-term abortion if the fetus has not just lethal abnormalities, but severe abnormalities. And she wants the Department of Public Health to incorporate the perspective of women who have had to leave Massachusetts to get an abortion as they figure out how this is going to work. It is, as you hinted at, really unusual to see one chamber call out the other, not in a sort of a snide aside from one of the leaders, but in a detailed, public, and somewhat lengthy manner. That letter was signed by close to 100 of Hogan's colleagues in the House. So, there's a bunch of different angles we can come at this from, but I think it's a fascinating testament to, again, how our expectations about the legislature are being subverted right now.
Katie, folks from out of state are always surprised that this democratically controlled House and Senate in Massachusetts always seems to be slow in getting things done. And with this sense of urgency, which I think it's safe to say that most lawmakers believe there is a sense of urgency, what are you hearing from senators regarding these proposals and from representatives? Are they going to be able to work together to get a progressive, expanded protection through before the deadline?
That's really the big question here is, are they going to be able to get it done? The senators like their bill in part because they think it will address potential concerns from Governor Baker, who has vetoed abortion legislation before because of the concerns he has around abortions later in pregnancy. So the senators think that with the clock ticking, and it's July 31 is when legislative sessions end, but if they want to give themselves time to respond to any amendments, to override a potential veto for the governor, the Senate is saying that keeping that later pregnancy abortion language out and coming back to it later on is the safest move for now to almost better their odds of getting something over the finish line. The Senate today announced a working group that's going to plan to explore that or other issues for maybe longer term future action after this summer.
Adam, just quickly, I mean, do you think that the voters of Massachusetts, what do you think they would be satisfied with? Do you think they would be satisfied with a compromise bill that Baker would sign, or something that is more aggressive and progressive that Baker would veto?
I'll be honest with you, I'm not up to speed on the latest polling around this issue, but I think I can say, Katie, tell me if I'm wrong here, that what advocates want to see, the people who are pushing for Massachusetts to move in the opposite direction, now that the Supreme Court's taken away the constitutional right to an abortion, they really want to see the measures that the House is pushing embraced. And just to harken back, Sue, to your original point, one reason that you don't put off everything until the absolute possible last minute is that if you do and something unexpected happens, then it becomes difficult for you to deal with. As Katie just said, the Senate's worried about having time to override the veto. That might not be as much of a concern if they'd done more of this stuff a little bit earlier on.
Katie, let's talk about sports betting. I know this isn't as urgent an issue for many in their lives, but this is one I feel like I've been talking about for forever. And as states around Massachusetts have legalized sports betting and are bragging, right or wrong, about the tax revenues that they're bringing in, where are the lawmakers at the State House on legalized sports betting for Massachusetts?
So both the House and the Senate have now passed bills that would legalize sports betting. Something that a lot of people are interested in. That's one of the bills that I think I'm most often asked about when I'm talking to people who aren't spending all their days in the State House. But the bills are very different, and they are one of several pieces of legislation that are in conference committees right now. So it's a group of 3 senators, 3 representatives conducting closed door negotiations that we really can't tell how things are going at that point. Like abortion legislation, like everything else, it's got to be done by July 31st if it's going to get done. And a while ago, Speaker Mariano, when we asked him about where things were, he said that both sides were going to have to be willing to move to get to a deal. We don't know how much they might have moved at this point. One of the big sticking points is around college sports betting, whether or not to authorize that. There's also different tax rates and consumer protection measures at play here. So there's a lot of parts that need to be ironed out.
Adam, there doesn't, I mean, again, since we've been talking about this for many years, it doesn't seem like there's a heck of a big demand from voters to get this done. Although people complain about it all the time, here we are.
I don't know if there's a big demand or not. I mean, as Katie just mentioned, she has anecdotal evidence that people care a lot about this. It seems like it's something that is of intense interest to the media, and I think that there's maybe some anecdotal evidence from WGBH even that when we run stories about it, people are interested in reading them. However, Senate President Karen Spilka said something similar to what you just did when she was asked about the divide between the Senate and the House at a media availability a couple months ago. And she essentially said, people don't care about this. When I go out in my district, when I go talk to voters, this isn't something they're asking about. So I think if you're taking bets on what is and isn't going to get done before the end of the session, the fact that she feels that way, that this is not an issue that's top of mind or of high concern to voters, is probably a reason to put this on your, maybe they won't get this done list.
All right, Katie, one thing they have to get done is the budget. We're already into the fiscal year. We've got tax relief issues. What are you hearing about the budget process and what's on the table for tax relief for who?
Yeah, the budget process is another black box conference committee situation. We're hearing that they might be getting somewhat close to a deal. Now, what close means when you're talking about $50 billion could be any number of things, but the state's not at risk of any sort of government shutdown or anything of the like because they have a temporary budget in place that runs through the end of July, which keeps services operational, but it also kind of removes some of the incentive to get a deal done quickly once you're already in July. Tax relief is a separate matter. The legislature opted to keep that out of the budget. And the House and the Senate this week announced that they have reached a deal on some ideas. Some of the measures that the legislature is now pursuing include one-time rebates for kind of middle income taxpayers is what they're trying to target. There's also relief that they're eyeing for renters, for seniors, for low-income workers, for parents with children. And one of the more controversial pieces so far has been that they are agreeing with Governor Charlie Baker and looking to reform the estate tax in some way, something that more progressive advocates tend to criticize as a break for the wealthiest. Supporters of, dealing with that inheritance tax, of reforming it, point to the rising home values across Massachusetts. Someone who's thought of themselves for middle class for years might be surprised to find out that their home now is worth $1 million and their heirs are going to be taxed on that value.
Yeah, oddly, I mean, I know everybody always thinks they're going to grow up to be a millionaire, and many people accidentally have. Adam, the virtual meetings and the open meetings issues, we're into the junior year of the pandemic here. We're all virtual. It still seems that lawmakers are trying to catch up to where humans are and how we're working. Any news on predictions on what will happen with those arcane laws that we all care about?
I want Katie to check me here and make sure that I have the right takeaway. But my understanding is that both chambers agree that we need to maintain the ability for people to participate in public meetings, not just by going there in person, but also by logging in and having video and audio access as we have during the pandemic. I think that while there's broad agreement, their mechanics or their mechanisms for getting to a point where that access is extended, there's some differences which again need to be hashed out along with everything else that's happening at this point in time, their overwhelming to-do list. I would say that the fact that there is strong consensus that we just can't keep operating the way we used to when you had to actually go to the State House if you wanted to catch one of the meetings that we're allowed to catch. I think that ultimately something's going to get done. Might get done this session. If it doesn't, I expect it'll get done early next session. But I would love to hear Katie's take.
Yeah, go ahead, Katie.
Yeah, there's a even closer deadline. Some of those pandemic era remote authorizations expire on Friday. Now, I believe they've let this lapse before because they've been extending it in kind of little chunks. And when they did ultimately agree, they did it retroactively to cover the times that had already passed. So even if, the calendar turns to Friday and they haven't reached a deal on how long to extend that authorization. And there's also some additional provisions about notary services and remote notarization that are wrapped up in this, that the branches are
Wow, it's kind of like those pictures from outer space we're seeing. There's the past, and it's just arriving to us now, and now we're notarizing things with a thingy.
It's beautiful and humbling.
There you go.
I know where you're going.
All right, Adam Reilly and Katie Lannan.